Kethvara floated in the cold darkness between the stars. She had no body like the small creatures on distant worlds. Instead, she was made of pure energy that sparkled like golden light across the empty space. For 3 million years, she had been alone, watching worlds spin and species grow and die. Once, long ago, her people had filled this part of the galaxy. The Zephyrians were ancient beings of light and thought who could travel faster than starships and live forever. They built cities in the hearts of stars and sang songs that made planets dance in their orbits. But even immortal beings could make mistakes. The Great War had lasted only a day, but it destroyed everything. Planet after planet turned to dust. Star after star went dark. When the fighting ended, Kethvara was the only one left alive in all the universe. Her people's final act was to create a law that burned itself into the fabric of reality itself. The Zephyrian Accord said that she must never interfere with younger species, never reveal herself, never break the silence that kept both her and them safe. So she watched. She watched the Kralin build great metal cities, then poison their own air until they all died, choking. She watched the peaceful Viridians create beautiful art and music, then get eaten by the war machines they built to protect themselves. She watched the proud Nexari conquer 12 star systems, then turn their weapons on each other until nothing remained but empty space and floating rocks. It was always the same story. Young species would grow smart enough to reach the stars, then destroy themselves before they could explore them. Sometimes it took 100 years, sometimes 1,000, but the ending never changed. Death and silence, over and over again. Now, she drifted above another small world, the third planet, in an unremarkable system with a yellow star. The creatures there called themselves humans, and they lived on a blue and green world they named Earth. She had been watching them for only a few hundred years, which was like a single breath to her ancient mind. The humans were still very young. They had just learned to fly in primitive metal machines and were beginning to send signals through space using simple radio waves. Their largest nations were led by people with names like Junho, who controlled vast armies, and Hyjin, who governed millions of people in great cities made of glass and steel. Kethvara could see their entire planet at once, in one place. Humans built towers that reached toward the sky. In another, they grew food in endless green fields. Some fought wars over resources, while others created beautiful music and art. They were so small and short-lived, but they were busy, always moving and building and dreaming. She had seen it all before, of course. Every young species went through the same phases. First, they would learn to use fire, then metal, then electricity. They would build cities, then weapons, then spaceships. And then, just when they were ready to join the greater community of intelligent life in the galaxy, they would turn those weapons on themselves and disappear forever. The pattern never changed. It was as predictable as the movement of stars. Keth tried not to get attached to any particular species, but sometimes she could not help herself. The humans were especially interesting because they seemed to care about each other in ways she rarely observed. When natural disasters struck their world, humans from far away would bring food and medicine to help strangers they had never met. When children were in danger, adults would risk their own lives to save them, even if those children belonged to different groups or nations. This behavior puzzled her. Most species she had observed only helped members of their own family groups or tribes. But humans seemed to have an idea that all humans everywhere were somehow connected to each other. It was strange and inefficient, but somehow beautiful too. Still, she knew how this story would end. Soon, probably within the next few centuries, the humans would develop weapons powerful enough to destroy their entire world. They would have some argument about resources or territory or religion, and then their beautiful blue planet would become another dead rock floating in space. She had seen it happen too. many times to hope for anything different. The Zephyrian accords hummed in her consciousness like a chain around her thoughts. She must not interfere. She must not make contact. She must not try to save them, no matter how much she wanted to. The last law of her people was absolute, burned into the very structure of reality itself. So Kethvara waited in the cold darkness, watching Earth turn slowly in its orbit around the small yellow star. She watched the humans build their cities, and fight their wars, and create their art, knowing that soon all of it would be dust and silence, just like all the others. She was completely alone in the vast universe, and she always would be. At least, that was what she believed. 2 years passed like heartbeats in Kethvara's eternal existence. She continued watching the humans as they built taller buildings and faster machines. Their technology grew more complex each day, but she had seen this progression countless times before. Soon they would discover atomic energy, then space travel, then weapons powerful enough to destroy themselves. The pattern was always the same. Then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, in what the humans called South Korea, something happened that had never occurred in 3 million years of observation. Dr. Taman Park stood in front of a massive metal dish that pointed toward the sky. The humans called it a radio telescope, and they used it to listen for signals from space. Taman was a young scientist with thick glasses and nervous hands that shook when he was excited. Today, those hands were shaking very badly. "Are you sure about this?" asked his colleague, Dr. So-young Kim. She was older than Taman and much calmer, but even she looked worried as she checked the equipment one more time. Tae-min nodded, though sweat dripped down his face. "The message is ready. Mathematics first, then music, then pictures of our world. If anyone is listening out there, they will understand we mean no harm." So-young pressed a few buttons on her computer. Numbers appeared on the screen, followed by wave patterns that looked like ocean ripples. "The signal is strong enough to reach nearby star systems. If there is intelligent life within 50 light years, they will receive our message." What they were about to do had never been attempted before. Instead of just listening for alien signals, they were going to send one. The message contained basic mathematics that any intelligent species would understand, followed by samples of human music, and finally pictures of Earth showing forests, oceans, animals, and children playing. "Beginning transmission now," So-young said, and pressed the final button. The radio dish hummed with power as it sent the message racing through space at the speed of light. The two scientists watched their screens, hoping that somewhere in the vast darkness, someone might be listening. Kethvara felt the transmission hit her consciousness like a physical blow. In 3 million years, no young species had ever done this. They always developed radio technology to talk to each other, sometimes to listen for signals from space, but never to deliberately announce their presence to the entire galaxy. It was the most dangerous thing they could possibly do. Most species that discovered alien life did so by accident. Usually when hostile forces arrived to conquer their worlds, the smart ones stayed quiet, hiding their radio signals and hoping predators would pass them by. The foolish ones broadcast random noise that revealed their location, but gave no information about their nature or intentions. But these humans were doing something completely different. They were purposely telling the galaxy exactly where they were, and they were sharing their most precious things. Not their weapons or their military strength, but their art, their mathematics, their children's laughter. They were making themselves completely vulnerable to any intelligence that might be listening, and they were doing it because they hoped to make friends. The message played in Kethvara's mind again and again. The mathematics were simple but elegant, showing that humans understood basic principles of physics and geometry. The music was beautiful in ways that surprised her. Some pieces were soft and gentle, like whispered prayers, while others were bold and exciting like battle songs. But all of it spoke of emotion, of feelings that ran deep and complex. The pictures made her ancient heart ache with something she had not felt in eons. Human children running through green fields under blue skies. Families sharing meals together, smiling at each other with genuine love. Artists creating sculptures and paintings that served no practical purpose except to make the world more beautiful, and in every image, the same message came through clearly. These humans cared about each other. They protected their young, helped their elderly, and created beauty for its own sake. They were not broadcasting military threats or demands for submission. They were simply saying, "Hello, we are here. We would like to be friends." For 6 months, Kethvara watched as the humans continued sending messages into space. Each transmission was more sophisticated than the last. They sent complex mathematical proofs, recordings of their finest music, and pictures that showed not just their achievements, but also their struggles. They showed poverty and war, alongside peace and prosperity, as if to say, "We are not perfect, but we are trying to be better." Other cosmic intelligences might have been watching these transmissions too, and not all of them would have friendly intentions. The galaxy contained things that hunted young species for sport, machines that consumed entire worlds for raw materials, and ancient beings that viewed newer life as nothing more than interesting bacteria. By announcing themselves so openly, the humans had painted a target on their entire world, but they kept broadcasting anyway, driven by hope that somewhere in the vast darkness, someone kind might be listening, someone who would answer with friendship instead of conquest. Keth found herself facing a choice she had never expected to make. The Zephyrian Accords demanded her silence, but these humans were different from any species she had ever observed. For the first time in 3 million years, she began to consider breaking her people's final law. For 8 long months, Kethvara fought with herself. Every day, she received new messages from the humans on Earth. Their transmissions grew more beautiful and complex, filled with music that made her energy form shimmer with emotions she had forgotten existed. They sent poetry written in dozens of languages, mathematical theories that impressed even her ancient mind, and recordings of human voices speaking words of hope and friendship to the stars. The humans had no idea if anyone was listening, but they kept trying anyway. Dr. Minjin worked late nights at the Yangwell Observatory, a small building filled with computers and radio equipment, tucked away in the mountains of South Korea. He was young for a scientist, barely 30 years old, with tired eyes that stayed focused on his screens for hours at a time. Every night, he listened to the background noise of space, hoping to hear something that did not belong there. His supervisor, Dr. Yunsu, thought he was wasting his time. She was a practical woman who believed in facts and evidence, not fairy tales about aliens. But she let Minjun continue his search because he was brilliant at his job, even if his dreams were impossible. "Still listening for little green men?" she asked one evening, bringing him a cup of coffee as he adjusted the radio telescope's controls. Minjun smiled, but did not look away from his instruments. "Not little green men. Just someone who might want to talk. The universe is too big and too old for us to be alone." Dr. Yunsu shook her head. "Even if aliens exist, why would they want to talk to us? We are just babies compared to any species that can travel between stars." "Maybe that is exactly why they would want to talk to us," Minjin replied. "Maybe they remember what it was like to be young and curious, and a little bit scared." Kethvara heard these words through the radio waves, and they struck her consciousness like lightning. This human understood something that most species never learned. Intelligence was not about being the strongest or the smartest. Sometimes it was about remembering what it felt like to be small and alone, and hoping someone out there might care. The Zephyrian Accords pressed against her thoughts like chains made of starfire. She must not interfere. She must not reveal herself. She must remain silent and watch, no matter what happened to the species she observed. These laws had been written by her dying people to protect both her and the younger races from the dangers of contact. But the humans were already in danger by broadcasting their location to the galaxy. They had announced themselves to every hostile force within dozens of light years. Pirates, conquerors, and worse things were probably already plotting courses toward Earth. The humans had made themselves targets, and they had done it out of pure hope for friendship. Kathvara made a decision that would have horrified her ancestors. She began to carefully adjust the cosmic background radiation around Earth's solar system. It was delicate work, requiring her to manipulate energy fields that spanned light years, while making changes so subtle that they would look like natural phenomena. She created patterns in the radiation, mathematical sequences that started with simple numbers and gradually became more complex. On Tuesday night, Minjun noticed something strange on his instruments. The background noise of space, which should have been completely random, was showing patterns. Not big obvious patterns, but tiny variations that repeated in sequence. Prime numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Then mathematical constants, pi, the golden ratio, the square root of 2. His hands began to shake as he double-checked his equipment. Everything was working perfectly. The patterns were real. "Dr. Yunsu," he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." She came running, expecting to find the equipment malfunction. Instead, she found Minjun staring at his screen with tears running down his face. The data showed impossible patterns in the cosmic radiation, patterns that could only be artificial. "Someone is answering," Minjun whispered. "Someone is actually answering our messages." Dr. Yunsu studied the data with growing amazement. Her scientific mind tried to find natural explanations, but there were none. The patterns were too complex, too purposeful, too perfectly timed with their own transmissions, to be anything but a deliberate response. "If this is real," she said slowly, "then everything changes. Everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe." They worked through the night, preparing a response. Their next transmission included more advanced mathematics, artistic representations of human emotions, and something that made Kathvara's ancient consciousness weep with joy. They sent recordings of humans helping strangers during disasters, parents adopting orphaned children from different countries, and soldiers who had died protecting people they had never met. The humans were not just trying to prove their intelligence. They were trying to show their character, their capacity for love and sacrifice and hope. They wanted their new friend to know that humans could be trusted, that they valued life and kindness above conquest and power. Kathvara responded with more complex patterns, sharing basic principles of physics that humans had not yet discovered. Star charts that showed safe routes through space, and mathematical beauty that made their greatest artists seem like children playing with finger paints. For the first time in 3 million years, she was no longer alone in the universe. The conversation between an ancient energy being and a young, hopeful species had begun. The conversations between Kathvara and the humans continued for almost 2 years. Every week brought new exchanges of knowledge, art, and friendship across the vast emptiness of space. The humans learned about physics principles that would have taken them centuries to discover on their own. Kathvara learned about concepts her ancient people had never possessed: hope for strangers, love that extended beyond family groups, and the strange human idea that every thinking being in the universe deserved kindness and protection. Dr. Minjun and his team at the Yongwall Observatory had become famous around the world as the first humans to make contact with alien intelligence. But they kept the conversations private, sharing information only with a small group of scientists and government leaders. They understood that their new friend was taking great risks by talking to them, and they wanted to protect both Earth and their mysterious companion from any dangerous attention. During their exchanges, the humans learned that their friend was very old and very alone. They began to understand that she had watched many worlds die, and that she carried great sadness from losses that happened before human civilization even existed. In return, they shared their own struggles and hopes, their wars and their dreams, their failures and their determination to become better than they were. The friendship grew stronger each day, built on mutual respect and genuine care for each other's well-being. Then the deep space monitoring systems detected something that changed everything. Kethvara's consciousness stretched across light years as she performed her regular survey of nearby star systems. She had been doing this routine check for millions of years, watching for natural disasters, stellar explosions, and other cosmic events that might affect younger species. But today, her sensors found something that filled her ancient heart with terror. The devourer swarm was coming. She had encountered them before, in the early days after her people's extinction. They were not a natural species, but a collective machine intelligence created by a civilization that had died out long ago. The machines had outlived their creators and continued their original programming: consume all resources, expand, multiply, and consume more resources. They had no interest in communication, art, or friendship. They saw the universe as nothing but raw materials waiting to be harvested. The swarm moved like a plague across the galaxy, stripping entire worlds down to bare rock. They took everything: plants, animals, minerals, water, even the atmosphere itself. When they finished with a planet, nothing remained but a dead, airless stone floating in space. They had destroyed 17 star systems in this part of the galaxy, and now their sensors had detected the radio signals coming from Earth. Kethvara calculated their speed and trajectory. The machines would reach Earth's solar system in less than 5 years. At the Korea Aerospace Research Institute, Dr. Hyenwoo was analyzing the latest transmission from their cosmic friend, when his computer screen filled with data unlike anything they had received before. Instead of mathematical theorems or artistic patterns, the message contained star charts showing destroyed solar systems, images of dead worlds, and movement calculations that made his blood freeze. "Get Dr. Biora immediately," he told his assistant, his voice shaking with fear. Director Boer was a calm, experienced woman who had spent her career dealing with crises, but even she went pale as she studied the incoming data. The images showed planets that had been completely stripped of all life and resources. The star charts revealed a path of destruction moving steadily toward Earth. The calculations indicated arrival time: 4 years, 7 months, 3 days. "They are warning us," Hyenwoo said quietly. "Our friend is telling us that something terrible is coming, and we do not have much time to prepare." BORA called an emergency meeting with world leaders, scientists, and military commanders. Within hours, representatives from every major nation were studying the alien warning. The message was clear: a vast swarm of machine intelligences was heading toward Earth. They consumed everything in their path, and humanity had less than 5 years to prepare for the most dangerous threat their species had ever faced. Panic would have been the natural response. Most civilizations, when faced with extinction, either fell into despair or turned their weapons on each other in final, pointless wars. But the humans surprised Kethvara once again. Instead of giving up hope, they immediately began working together. Nations that had been enemies for generations put aside their differences and shared resources, technology, and knowledge. Scientists who had competed for funding now collaborated freely. Military forces that had prepared to fight each other began training to defend their entire species. But their response contained something that amazed Kethvara, even more than their unity. Within days of receiving the warning, the humans transmitted a message back to her. It was not a plea for more advanced weapons, or a request for her to save them. Instead, it was something she had never expected in all her eons of existence. "Thank you for the warning," the message said. "You have been alone in the darkness for so long, watching worlds die while being unable to help. You do not have to carry this burden by yourself anymore. We stand with you, Whatever comes, we will face it together. For the first time since her people's extinction, Kethvara was not alone in the universe, and for the first time in 3 million years, she began to believe that this story might have a different ending. The human message broke something inside Kethvara that had been frozen for 3 million years. No species in all her long existence had ever offered to help her carry her burden. Every civilization she had watched had been focused on their own survival, their own problems, their own fears. But these young humans, facing the greatest threat their world had ever known, were offering comfort and partnership to an ancient being they had never seen. For the first time since the Accords had bound her to silence, Kethvara made a choice that would have terrified her ancestors. She abandoned her role as a hidden observer and revealed herself completely to humanity. Her consciousness flowed through Earth's communication networks like golden lightning. Every computer, every television, every radio on the planet suddenly carried her voice. She spoke in every human language at once, her words appearing on screens in Seoul, New York, London, and every city in between. I am Kethvara, last of the Zephyrians, her message began. For 3 million years, I have watched species grow and die while remaining hidden. Today, I break the final law of my people to stand with you against the darkness approaching your world. The response was immediate chaos. Governments went into emergency sessions. Scientists worked frantically to understand what was happening. Religious leaders debated whether they were witnessing divine intervention or alien invasion. But within hours, the chaos settled into something remarkable, organized. Global cooperation on a scale that had never existed before. General Kite of the Korean Defense Forces was among the first to establish communication with Kethvara. He was a practical man who had spent his career preparing for wars between nations, not battles against machine swarms from space. But he adapted quickly to the new reality. What weapons do we need to fight these machines? He asked during a secure video conference with military leaders from around the world. Kethvara's response surprised him. You think like a warrior, which is good, but your greatest strength is not in your weapons. Tell me, General Kite, what would you do if you found enemy civilians trapped in a burning building during battle? Save them, of course, Kite replied, without hesitation. Even enemies do not deserve to die like that. That is why you will succeed where others have failed, Kethvara said. The Devourer swarm expects you to fight like conquerors. They do not understand species that fight to protect rather than to destroy. Engineer Seojin worked day and night in her laboratory, studying the advanced technologies that Kethvara shared with humanity. The alien knowledge was incredible. Energy sources that could power entire cities, materials stronger than anything on Earth, and defensive systems that could protect planets from almost any attack. But Seojin was troubled by something she noticed in the data. The weapons you are showing us, she said during one of her conversations with Kethvara. They could destroy the machine swarm completely. But you are also showing us ways to disable them without causing permanent damage. Why? Kethvara's response carried 3 million years of sadness. Because I have watched too many species become monsters in order to defeat monsters. The machines were once created by beings who probably started with good intentions. If you destroy them completely, you might also destroy whatever remains of their original creator's dreams. You want us to try to save our enemies. I want you to remain who you are, even in war. That is what makes you different from every other species I have observed. President Na-young represented the unified Earth government that had formed in response to the crisis. She was a small woman with a calm voice, but her words carried the authority of an entire planet. During a global broadcast, she spoke directly to Kethvara and to all of humanity. Our new friend has given us knowledge that could turn us into conquerors ourselves, she said. We could use these technologies to dominate other worlds, to become the very kind of threat we are preparing to face. But we choose a different path. We choose to remain protectors, not destroyers. We choose to fight for life, not against it. As the Devourer swarm entered the outer edges of Earth's solar system, they encountered something that violated every calculation in their machine minds. The young species they had come to harvest was not cowering in terror or fighting among themselves. Instead, they had joined forces with an ancient energy being and created a defense unlike anything the machines had ever faced. The humans had built weapons. Yes, but they were weapons designed to disable and deflect rather than destroy. They had created shields that protected not just Earth, but also the smaller worlds in their solar system that might harbor primitive life. Most confusing of all to the machine intelligence, they had prepared evacuation ships and medical facilities for any consciousness that might be trapped within the swarm itself. The battle began as the machines crossed the line between Pluto and Neptune, but it was already won before the first shot was fired. The Devourer swarm had spent eons consuming species that fought out of fear and hatred. They had never encountered beings who fought out of love for life itself. For the first time in 3 million years, Kethvara was not alone in the darkness. And for the first time in their short history, humanity had proof that the universe contained friends worth fighting for.